Those with loaded guns, and those who dig.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Outlawed Thoughts. This is episode 42. This is kind of a weird one. I'm here with Samuel Tweed from Twitter. I found you kind of I put a general post out there looking for people who wanted to talk religion and random stuff around it. Topic I haven't really covered on the show, so I thought it'd be fun to kind of open it up. And I'm sure we'll do more than one episode on this in particular because it's kind of something that has a bunch of historical stuff that I like to get into too. But yeah, this should be a fun one. We'll kind of keep track of chat if people pop into there. Although I know it's like late as shit everywhere. Well, go ahead and introduce yourself, I guess. Maybe kind of what your background is. I guess maybe political affiliation because we talk a lot about like libertarian stuff here.
Yeah, my name's Sam Tweed. I'm just kind of a general Twitter troublemaker, but I'm more of the libertarian leaning, although I'm not like actively involved in the party by any means. But I follow all of the characters on Twitter and sometimes pipe in with some dumb thoughts. But I was raised Christian. Studied a lot of the Bible, memorized it, not so much involved in the church anymore, but I find religion and talking about it fascinating because like the one thing people say is, oh, don't ever talk religion and politics. And I always love talking about things you're not supposed to talk about. And it's not very easy to offend me, but I sometimes I like to see what people get really offended about.
Yeah, that's and so like I guess the counter of that is like my upbringing is more of a non-traditional, more reformed Jewish later in life, and then kind of earlier on a little more, I'd say, stricter Jewish in the beginning, and then sort of around the time like I hit around 16, 15, that kind of went away because it was just more of a up to us thing as far as my family was concerned. And for me, I went more of the path of not really becoming religious again. I tell people like, because the question comes up, I suppose, in like conversation, even though people do say not to talk religion. I do hear occasionally, like, oh, well, what do you believe, or what's your, beliefs? And I always kind of tell people nowadays that I like, don't really know, but like my belief is that there is probably some kind of higher power, but I don't really know what that is, and I don't think that you know what we have as traditional answers necessarily takes care of it. What I fell in early with like atheist groups, and I thought that well, this is kind of interesting, the idea of like science explaining a lot of the stuff. But ultimately I went down like that Hitchens rabbit hole that I think a lot of people do when they're like looking into religion. And I do think it's beneficial to people. Like, I think a big mistake a lot of like religious types that are like active in whatever faith they're prescribed to will like look at people in that kind of space and will just say, well, we just ignore them. Like, well, that's not a good idea because eventually people are going to listen to these guys, and they're very convincing with their arguments. But there was a moment for me that like ruined the Hitchens thing, which was there's like a recording of this one guy Hitchens debated, and I'll see if I can find this later for the show. But this guy was obviously pro-religion. I can't remember what faith he was a part of, but he asked Christopher Hitchens in the limo ride, and I don't think Hitchens knew it was being recorded, but he asked him if he could make everybody on the planet atheist, would he do it? And Hitchens replied with, no, I wouldn't, because there'd be nobody left to argue with.
Yep.
And like, it was the most Hitchens response to that you could come up with, but it also, to me, shows the kind of fatal issue with that kind of mindset, which is that it only thrives because you get to argue this against the faiths. It doesn't really mean anything if the religions weren't around.
I think that my thought on that, because I remember when I kind of stopped going to church, like, early 20s in college, and just kind of like, screw this, I've got partying and stuff to do. And then also like, oh, we missed you in church, come to church. And then it's that, and a lot of people who get out of religion feel this, they go the complete opposite way, and they'll just, be like, oh, I'm trying to be blasphemous, or there is no God, or anything like that. But I really feel one thing is that, like, the hardcore atheist, like, that's your religion. It's like, that's your religion. It's like arguing with people that are religious.
Oh, absolutely.
And blaming religion for all the world's problems, which is another thing, which is like, all the examples that are typically picked are like, the Crusades. I don't know if that was actually all about religion, or if it was about, let's go kill some people and steal
conquest. It's no different than any other empire wanting to conquest or take any kind of territories. I mean, the funny thing about that is, like, from a historical standpoint, it's like almost everything people point to historically as being the big bad. This is, like the Crusades, or really anything pre, 1800s, 1700s, kind of stuff that went on. It's like most of that stuff only happened because of, like, one kingdom or conquesting group wanting to take control of another conquesting group, or a monetary exchange went bad, or some kind of trade thing broke down. It almost never happened because someone was just like, hey, I have this religion and you have this religion, and I'm going to go kill you. Well, like, there was always some other kind of mix in of things that were happening.
To me, it's kind of like, was the Civil War all about slavery? Do we believe this? Is this what we're believing? Because I'm not gonna believe that all these conquests were about religion, when it's like, no, this is a tool that you use people to convince people of your noble cause. It's not the actual underlying thing. It's not gonna benefit the rulers to send a bunch of people to die for their religion. Right. So I mean,
and I think especially now, when you have kind of the kind of religious communities now are so different than they used to be, and I think that so many people have fallen into the trap, especially more people now, of like this push for orthodoxy that seems to exist, where people are like, well, we're returning back to the old way of doing religious things, we're going back to orthodoxy and this, but the problem is you're not. Like, you're not practicing the way that the faith used to be, because you can't. Because ultimately the faith at this point is controlled, like, on the back end by people who don't believe in that version of the faith anymore, and in fact are following, like, what is not ideals of the religion. This is kind of the reason why I fell off with a lot of, like, the Zionist argument versus anti-Zionism, and that thing is the same reason. It's like, well, no, like, Zionism has done something to the faith that is actively working against what the faith is supposed to be in the orthodoxy. So you can't very well practice something if the place where that religion comes from is altering it from the base, right? Like, the same thing with, like, Buddhism, which a lot of people ignore. Like, modern Buddhism is nothing like it used to be. It's been completely bastardized and kind of formed into this product that can be sold and put in books to kind of get tourism industries and things like that involved. Mm-hmm. It's definitely fallen from the kind of classic more spiritually based beliefs. Benzo Barbie, hey, welcome. Sorry, I'm late. Yeah, but I guess where I kind of split off from things from religious base was really kind of just taking a look at everything as a whole and doing some reading that I had done early on. Obviously, understanding the Bible and understanding all that stuff is one thing, but I looked into like what the religions themselves from an organizational standpoint are doing, and I think that's what turns a lot of people off. Is they go, well, the religion itself might be good, but the organization built up around it isn't. And if that's the case, then you end up with a kind of a parasitic environment where the religion feeds off of like the organization of the religion feeds off of the people who are worshiping the religion that they feel is good, but then the money is just getting used for stuff that like no one would actually support. So it's like this reminds me a lot of the government.
Yeah, it's like it's an at scale problem where it's like,
well, I don't think there's any problem with, for instance, a small church in a town that has 3,000 people compared to the Vatican.
Well, yeah, that's the opposite ends. And you have like, because I'd gone to churches or grown up in churches before where we didn't even really have a pastor. Right. It would just be like, 4 or 5 families together, and then they sit down and read their Bibles, a certain section, and one person gets up and talks about their thoughts on it. And it's pretty much just like a little community meeting. And then there's Joel Osteen's church, and right. And then there's like all this. And
well, here in Alaska, we have a thing called The Rock, which is like a huge church, and it's funded by an even bigger church that exists nationally. And they have like what I can only describe as a fucking like, it's an amusement park. Like it's like a massive church that has a little soccer thing there and like an area to do sporting events, and then they have a giant meeting hall that they do like concerts and stuff. It's like, yeah, it's a giant venue.
It's like Jim Baker's like wet dream of a.
Yes.
Actually, no. That was what Jessica Vaughn. Mm-hmm. What was her name? Han.
Yeah. No, but it's yeah, they've got some bigger ones up here, and there's a big synagogue here in Anchorage that was like the main one when I was growing up and stuff, and that's where everybody went. I think it really, I think where the organization of things has gone is like the scaling thing you're talking about there is the biggest issue, where like you went from a ton of small churches that weren't really connected and a bunch of small synagogues that weren't really connected in around the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, kind of in that era, going into the 60s and 70s, where religion became much more organized in a sense, where those, whether it be the Catholic powers that be, or the Jewish powers that be, or the Buddhist powers that be, took the more profitable road, which is kind of, I guess it's something that probably people should have suspected, but it does suck. Like if you're somebody trying to learn about the faith, even in the modern context today, I feel like it's harder than ever to learn like the accurate history of all of these faiths. That's a struggle, because like, especially on the like side of like, you can't, if you just look up the history of some of these religions on Wikipedia, you're not getting the real story, right? Like, and yeah, Wikipedia is stupid and don't use it, but like that is what the majority of people are using. Yeah. And so it's sad to know that that's like the reality, is like most people don't understand these faiths that they're practicing anyway.
It's interesting thought that I kind of have about some of that too, is the number of different, like in the Christian church, the number of different denominations. And I know a little bit about it, not like very specifics, but since like the Reformation and since like leaving from the, more Orthodox or Catholic, whatever, traditions, and then forming like Protestant churches, it seems like every time there was a disagreement, they just split apart and just continued
it's the Bitcoin method.
Yeah,
it's the Bitcoin method.
And now it's like we're like just down this road, just down from my house. There are 4 churches on the same road.
Yeah.
And
I live in a town with 2,000 people. The whole city is about, well, whole town. It's technically classified in a bunch of paperwork as a village. So that's how small it is. But there is 5 churches here in a town that's whole total length is a mile.
Yeah. Pretty much, yep. And I bet if you went to any one of them, you pretty much see the same thing.
Yeah, they're identical. There's a Nazarene church, there's a Catholic church, a Protestant church, and I swear to God, the buildings look the same. Like the colors are different. That's it. It's the
that
same.
Was the most recent split.
Yeah.
The most recent split was what color should the building be, and then half the people get mad.
Yeah, it's like every Baptist church you see is cream colored or light blue. There is no other color they're allowed to be. It's like and every Nazarene church I seem to see is either green or like beige.
Yeah,
it's
I think I grew up in the Nazarene church. I think the one down the road, I think they just went from beige to green. So
no shit. Yeah, the one here went from beige to green too, just like 1.5 years, 2 years ago. That's nuts. It's
maybe
like
they do have. I know that they do have like large conventions, regional conventions, and then they have like a national one. So they do make these decisions. I like to laugh and think about it like people think like, oh, the church convention gets together and they plot all these ways that they're gonna control people and what they're gonna have them thinking and talking about, and they're just like, what color should we go with?
Dude, so have you ever seen the Korean churches that have like the Asian Jesuses?
No.
Like, okay, so we had one of these when I was growing up. So my grandmother for a short while lived in Mountain View, which is like the hood of Alaska. It's like highest crime rate, and it's a shithole. There's like drive-bys and shit. It's a really shitty place to live. Anybody who lives in Alaska knows that Mountain View is a shithole. But there were these low-income housing units over there, and my grandmother used to live in one of those fucking things. And like one of the stories that came from this apartment is my grandmother's Jeep. Like there was just some girl and a guy who were hopped up on meth one night and decided to just run around Mountain View torching people's cars. And so like her Jeep was they just tossed a firebomb in the front seat, like shit
they
like
sound
that.
awesome.
Yeah, it's just a kind of shitty place to live. But
they need more Jesus.
Yeah, well, they had some next door. So right next to this apartment was this pink salmon-colored Korean church that just had all these like Korean writing, all over the front and stuff. And the only time I ever went in there was just when I was like younger. I poked my head in there once because they were doing food stuff, like free food. And I remember looking at there, and they have a giant sculpture of Jesus on the wall, right? Cross it all, except Jesus is slanty-eyed and Asian. Like, that's the only way to explain it. It's an Asian Jesus.
I think that's my new favorite Jesus.
I gotta see if I can find a photo of this that represents it good. But Asian Jesus is real, man. He was...
So are you familiar with the Black Hebrew Israelites?
To a degree, yeah.
Like they yell about, they wear robes and they yell at people in the streets about the white devil. Yeah. 3 years ago, I was in Jackson, Mississippi, and which I wasn't aware at the time that it's like one of the most dangerous places in the South, especially if you're white. Like, but I was just like, oh, I wonder what those fellows over there are yelling about. And so I walked up to them because I wasn't going to turn that opportunity down. And they had these posters with a picture of Jesus and the 666 on his head. And I was like, hey, fellas, what are you up to? And they were explaining to me about how Jesus wasn't white. And my response was, oh, yeah, I mean, probably wasn't. I mean, he might probably, yeah, I don't know. It's not really important though, is it? Like, I mean, isn't like what he said the thing that people kind of remember him for? Like, and they were just like, they were expecting me to be like, no, Jesus. What did they think I was gonna be like? No, Jesus was white. Like, what kind of an argument is it really to have though? And I was just perplexed. Like, I don't know if it was just like, I don't know what that was though. Just like, we're gonna get out and go convince people.
The Black Hebrew Israelite thing, like their whole like belief structure is just completely shoddy. Like, because the it's based in history, but it can't be proven history. It's based in something that is completely like unprovable from either side. So they're just like, no, you just have to believe us, trust us, bro. It's like, no, like, at least have some kind of something to back this up. It's like, no, dude, trust me, for sure. Jesus was like black, and like all these weird characters are real, and we're the real like okay. So here's one part of it. Like you've got the, what do they call them, the Ethiopians, right? And the Ethiopians are constantly being like, some Jews came over to us back in the day and were like, yo, become Jewish. And we did it. And so we should be included in all this stuff. And so that's one of the things that they use as like the basis for their, and that some of that's true. Like, some of that's legitimately true. Some of what the Ethiopians talk about did legitimately happen historically. Like, you can pretty closely prove it. The problem is none of what they claim means any of what they claim. It's like they've built this whole philosophy off of an idea that's like, huh? Like, this doesn't exist anywhere.
Which is also like, because when you say like, okay, yeah, we're going to talk religion, I'm like, hell yeah, I'm in for that, because that's so broad. We could get to any like that category. But speaking of like making stuff up, like, Mormonism is awesome. I love it. And I've always like been fascinated with when they come up to your door. I want to talk to them. And I'm not even actually being disrespected. I'm just fascinated by what is it that they believe. And I've been told, well, actually, I looked it up. It is actually factual that like part of my family is descended from like relative of Oliver Cowdery, who helped Joseph Smith start the church. And essentially, he would write things down for Joseph Smith because Joseph Smith would just make stuff up.
Yeah.
And not remember what he had said yesterday the next day. And so he would try to kind of organize it in a way that they could be somewhat consistent. And I mean, I'm not trying to give them a hard time if they can believe what they want to believe, but this last summer I was house sitting for a friend and some Mormons came by, and I was just like, yeah, I'll talk to you guys. And I was like, hey, do you have a book? Like, and they're like, yeah, absolutely. And they gave me a Book of Mormon, and I've got it sitting right over here. And I cracked it open, and it is unreadable. It is like, it is impossible to understand. Like, I'm not a brilliant guy, but it sounds like if you took someone like a teenager that had been to church a few times, put him in prison for 20 years with like solitary confinement, and then gave him a bunch of paper and a pen and said, write out what the Bible sounded like. It's just I have no idea what's going on here. I don't, but yeah. Maybe I wasn't in the good part, but
no, I never really went super deep into the whole Mormonism thing. I was friends and played in a card group with a guy whose family was like big into Mormonism here in Alaska, and they still are. Some of the family has like broken away from it, and so I was friends with him and his brother. He was in Mormonism and was literally in the middle of getting ready to do a mission, and his brother had completely turned away. He had like, I'd smoked weed with him and hung out, like played video games with the guy and like talked shit, and he was like, yeah, you know, the whole thing's like what it's all again, his issue with it was that it had, at the end of the day, exerted power. Like the once you got out of adulthood, the Mormon kids would be under this impression like that was it. They were adults. They got to decide what they wanted to do. But you get to that point, and because of the way the Mormon church is designed, you just get moved from adulthood back into the church. And so there's no break in between there to get any individuality. And so a lot of times I feel like they just spin out. I love this. I'm picturing these LDS kids trying to politely find a break in the conversation and escape Samuel's ceaseless questions.
You must have seen that conversation, actually. Well, to be fair, like when they were walking by, they were actually staying across the street in like a complex across the street. And I was on the roof just hammered drunk yelling, "Hey guys, come over here. I want to talk to you." So yeah, they were amused. They were having fun.
The other ones are like the Jehovah's Witnesses. Those guys used to show up around Alaska more so than they do now. I don't really see them around ever. But I feel like they kind of disappeared in general from knocking on people's doors. But they used to knock on doors too.
I haven't heard about them as much as you used to. And I have a few friends that grew up in that organization, and I didn't get too much into it, but I've just heard it's a lot of odd.
Yeah.
A whole lot of odd. I mean, but I gotta really say, because since like growing up in a church, for someone who grew up like not religious, does all of it all seem like that? Like whether or not you believe it.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so because I was like loosely religious, we weren't really like, because when you say Reformed Jewish, it's just a way of saying like, okay, like I have a ton of Jewish family, but there was no way in hell we were going to practice Orthodoxy. Like it just wasn't going to happen because we couldn't feasibly make it happen, like monetarily. Like people don't really take that stuff into account, but to practice real Orthodox,
it's very expensive.
Yeah, it literally is, because like, okay, there's certain things that the wife and husband have to participate in. They can't be in the same rooms at certain times. There has to be certain things. So you have to have a very certain type of home. You have to have a very certain type of travel structure and schedule and things like that are very difficult. If you, for instance, with my family, I had a mother who wasn't like completely mentally stable, and later on that led to my parents separating. But at the time of them like raising us, there was no way she was going to bring apart any kind of faith while my dad was outside the home. So when both of them were there, they weren't spending their time worried about religion. They were spending their time worried about making money and keeping food on the table and roof over our heads and stuff like that. It just wasn't really the priority of the household. But we celebrated the holidays. We knew about what the holidays meant and what they represented and the history of the religion. And we went to synagogue to do events and things like that. But we weren't, as active. I will say this. I had parents who just let me do whatever I wanted in religion and politics and things like that. So from the outside, I always looked at pretty much all the organized religions as kind of doing the same thing. But I will say, like, Catholicism always seemed weird because the amount of, like, power that they always exerted. But then once I understood the same thing existed on the Jewish side, I just wasn't aware of it, and you realize, well, all of these kind of organized religions are kind of just giant power structures. Like,
the fact that there's a pope, like, that, I was thinking about that earlier today. I was like, what happens? Oh, you vote? Y'all vote for a pope? Like, and then what? Like, and then he's like that's really one thing that weirds me out, is because it's like they own a country.
Well, so here's the thing. I'm watching, by the way, this is a documentary that is very well hidden, but there was a documentary done a while back called Rings of Power. It's like 5 hours long in total. There's a lot of this. It was like a 5-6 part series. There's a link to it for the YouTube. I will tweet it out after this show if anybody wants it, or they can DM me and I'll send it to them or whatever.
You gotta at Kyrie.
But it goes through like London and the Vatican and DC and all these different areas that were kind of all funded by religious groups and secret societies that are not part of the country that they're in, right? So DC with the monuments it has and all the things it has that are backed by the Masons and things like that. And then you've got London, which is backed by the Rothschilds and the banking industry. And it's also not technically part of England. It doesn't pay taxes, things like that. And then you have, the same thing with the Vatican and things like that. So it's weird. Definitely an odd. Seems like, okay, you guys got so much power, you actually went over the government. Like, is almost what it seems like. Or you are the government.
The actual.
And then you get into the more kind of Illuminati stuff, but it is what it is. Like, how much of the power of religion just became the power of the government?
Right, or it's the face of like, hey, lodge your complaints over here. Go to this government building and protest there, but don't be showing up over at our place.
Exactly. Well, that's, precisely, yeah. This is from Spud. Went to church for a while with a preacher that looked like Ned Flanders, but he was an asshole. He was an aide at our school, and we would mock him and Evan called him Flanders or Ned.
There's a jail guard.
Most people forgot his actual name.
Yeah, there was a jail guard we called Ned Flanders. He was pretty much the same dude. Just
oh god, I got a libertarian to orthodoxy pipeline. We were just talking about that. So
yeah,
I was talking about that. I think the orthodoxy pipeline is stupid because the end of that pipe is not really orthodoxy, and it's just another organized religion that's already co-opted and not really faithful to its kind of beginnings, is the way that I would word it. I had to be careful because there are a lot of libertarian orthodox and that whole thing runs around. And I do plan on having people like Popular Liberty on here and stuff like that to talk about this topic, but I just don't see it as being really orthodoxy. Like, and I know that's like real, like not okay, but it's not. Well, it's real, but it's a thing you can practice, right? But I don't think it is the orthodoxy of that religion, right? Like, I don't necessarily know if that makes sense, but like their claim is like this is the kind of the original form of a religion, right? That's the whole point of the orthodoxy of something. But I don't know if that necessarily is. And I don't think you can practice it in the real world with all of these other religions influencing. It's like a religious proxy war. Like, that's what goes on constantly. Like, all these smaller religious groups are fighting other religious groups on the back end, like monetarily and within the media. And it's like, it's a fucking, that whole shit show's just chaos.
Are we going to get to Scientologists and whether or not there is a difference between a cult and a religion? Because that's something I'd like to hear your thoughts on.
Yeah, we could do the whole Scientology rabbit hole. That's so I guess I see, this is going to sound really bad, but I feel like Scientology is better than a lot of other religions out there. And I know this is going to sound weird, but hear me out. I've known a lot of people who were involved in Scientology, and their lives were exponentially better. Like, they just were. And they do shitty practices, and they do shitty things. But they kind of let you know, to a certain extent, that you're kind of signing your life away. And the results seem to be decent for a lot of people. And so part of me is like, I don't know how to feel about this because it's obviously this wackadoo bullshit that like this guy who wrote a science fiction novel came up with. But at the same time, like, okay, if a group of people just started worshipping Harry Potter, but by worshipping Harry Potter, their lives got better, like, like I don't know, I might be okay with those guys worshipping Harry Potter too. Like, I don't know. There's things they've done that I really don't like the whole kind of entrapment part of it, which
Like
I
a
think
contract that you sign your life away literally.
exactly.
Like,
Well, okay, like I'm a kind of ANCAP, so like
it was voluntary.
it is voluntary. Like for real though, like to an extent, you're signing a piece of paper saying you're going to do this thing. You know what the contract says. Um, but to the extent of like, the cultist side of it, I think where the entrapment stuff comes into play is when you read a lot of the literature and start getting into the people who've come away from it, which I do think you have to take with a grain of sand because they're obviously getting a monetary, you know, everybody who leaves the Scientologist church immediately writes a book about how they left the Scientologist church, right? Like that's just how it is. Because yeah, they want to get money, they want to get their story out there, whatever you will believe the opinions are. But like Leah Remini is a good one of those. She came out and then made a documentary and got a bunch of money off of it. And so you have to run into this area where you go, okay, well, did you leave Scientology and make this documentary and write this book and all this stuff because you wanted money? Or did you leave Scientology and write all this stuff and do this because you don't like the religion?
Yeah.
And that's kind of a hard coin to flip. I do see this Shelley Miscavige. Yeah, so I'm not saying that they're good. I'm saying that the religion itself, right? Like obviously the Catholic religion has killed people before. Okay, the Jewish religion has killed people before, right? So is it any different? Like that's something people are going to have to decide because this religion's newer than others. So that's where it kind of becomes this weird situation where is this a cult because it's newer? Or is it a cult because it's a cult?
That's
Is
what
this
that's what I wonder because I've heard people like non-religious folks say like church is like they're all just really
See, I
cults.
disagree with you, Benzo. I think if people knew about all the stuff in the background, they'd still sign that piece of paper. A lot of people would. I think you give people too much credit.
So you were saying though, like you've known people who were in
Yeah,
Scientology.
I've known two guys when I was younger who went on to move to California. One of them ended up moving over to New York, but one of them's still in California. I don't have contact with the guy who went to New York, but I know he went on to like do stuff that I would consider to be successful. The guy in California went to like, he was kind of a fucked up kid when I knew him. He was like not really all there, but he went over there and got started dating some chick who was part of their whole group, and ended up joining and worked for like a company that was owned by some guy who worked with a Scientologist, so it got him a job out of the deal, and he rose up through that, and I think he's now working like making like 35-40 bucks an hour, and he
So
works as like a just normal, like, but he makes good money.
so is that one of those things? Because like, have you ever known someone that was like way off the rails, like drugs, alcohol, and stuff, and they just have to go totally clean sober, or they get very involved in like religion or whatever, and then it's like
Yeah,
saves their life.
I've known people
Like,
who've gotten Alaska has a lot of cults. So I've known a lot of people who've gotten involved with cults when they had drug issues and things like that.
and it's like, yeah, you probably wouldn't be alive right now if you hadn't done something. So maybe it's just being accepted or being in a group sometimes. I don't know.
Do you have a cat?
Oh yeah, she's
Everybody
chilling.
in the chat wants you to show the cat.
She's chilling.
Oh, that's a cool kitty too. See, there you go. I have dogs, so Every once
Yeah,
in a while, one of the dogs will come in here, and I'm like, all right, now you're going to come on the stream.
I just got this one from a friend a few months ago, or like during the summer, because she needed a home. She's very nice, but usually I would have dogs.
She looks like she's enjoying that bed.
Yeah,
My
she's
dog
chilling.
will hop up on the comforter and just flip over and do her thing.
Do um do you think that maybe we should go back to worshiping cats? Or do you think like some people do? Do you think that's maybe a viable like
Well, see, I
religion?
mean, if you believe in a lot of those secret societies, then a lot of them believe in the Egyptian occult, and they already do.
And so these are like their spies, like the government, the
It's
birds
not
aren't
the
real.
birds, motherfuckers.
Yeah,
It's never
the
been the
birds
birds.
aren't
It's
real.
the cats. The cats are drones, man.
And maybe the cats are the OG drones, and that's why they're all killing birds because they're like, I don't know what these things are doing, trying to take over our territory.
Taking over our space.
Yeah.
The cats. That would be a great concept for like a short video or skit. It's just a bunch of cats hunting down birds because they're the new model of T2000.
Oh my gosh.
No, but it is I mean, I don't know how far I go into the whole secret society like versus religion thing. But I do think there's a lot of bleed over. The English monarchy and the kind of Hebrew diocese and the Catholic hierarchy with the Masonry and those kind of things. I think there's a lot of tie-ins between those groups that I'm like, I don't really like this. It seems like you guys are like taking over a lot of shit that we didn't know you were gonna have control of.
Yeah, I didn't even know until like this is going to not make me sound dumb. This is going to show how intelligent I am. I didn't even know that like the Freemasons were really like a religion because I mean they
Have
like
you ever
until
read
I was
Jefferson's
older.
Bible?
No. But
You gotta read that shit, man. That's some weird shit. It's like the Bible, but with the God part removed. So like, I'm serious. It's like that's the original Jesus is just a guy, man. It's literally that. But no, I have a lot of books on the Masonry. I have like their handbook and things, like their real handbook, not the one that was written by that bullshit charlatan. But it's some weird shit, man. Leighton, I loved your commentary on real bush people in Alaska. My aunt lives in the Yukon, and they had a guide business. Looked nothing like the HGTV. My outdoor life BS cracked me up. Yeah, so I'm gonna just pause the religion talk for 2 seconds to rant about this. But every reality TV show that has ever been based in Alaska is 99% bullshit. There has never been one of them. Okay, I'll say this. Deadliest Catch is a halfway decent representation of what it is actually like to be on a crab boat. My dad was a crab fisherman, worked the halibut season, worked basically every fishing season there is to work in the state. I have friends right now who are working out of Washington and Seattle, working in that industry, people who I meet every day who are doing that because this is what this town is known for here. That stuff is pretty accurately betraying. It's a very dangerous fucking job. Like, I have people from people my family have known throughout just the last 40, 30 years who have been just killed by, boat tilted and a bunch of barrels hit them, or, crab pot came up and broke their arm and the helicopter didn't get them in time. They died from the infection. Stuff like that just happens all the time. That's the only reality show that's ever done justice to any kind of working industry in that. There's been logging shows, there's Yeti shows, there's Portlock, Alaska shows, there's shows that have been done on every fucking molehill or little rock structure that exists in this state. They're all bullshit. They don't even show you what Alaska looks like. Like, they show you one mountain and they're like, this is the last frontier. And it's like, man, fucking show some people like Kenai or Soldotna or Anchorage. Like, at least show them what Alaska actually looks like. or go to the villages or something. Don't show them some bullshit. And then you've got Yukon, the real bush people, or the bush people of Alaska, or whatever they call it. I can't even remember what the name of it is, but I went on this rant about it before, but it's like, that show is complete horseshit. I grew up in a 500 square foot cabin with 7 people. Okay? We had my dad, my mom, and my 4 brothers, plus me. That's 7 people in 500 square foot. You know how many rooms we had in our cabin? None. It was a cabin. It was 4 walls. That was it. That's what an actual Alaskan cabin looks like. There is no bathroom because you dig a hole outside, and that is your bathroom. And you rarely have power because you're going to use a generator, or you're going to use some other form of power because it's cheaper than the obscene electric prices that exist in most of these areas. So it's like you see these TV shows and they're like, if we don't get enough wood to go through, we're not going to make it for the winter. Motherfucker, you're surrounded by the woods. Like, you don't need that much wood to get through a season. Like, and you run off of a wood stove, not oil. Like, a bunch of these shows are showing these fucking cabins and they're laid out completely retarded. They're talking about how they're blocking their cabins off with materials so that one portion of the cabin is slightly warmer than the other. That's not how you do that. The way you do that is by building a cot tent system where you build a dome inside your house, which keeps it more insulated. They didn't even understand the thing they were trying to do in the show. Like, at this point, I have given thought to just recording a video. Like, if anybody knows EFAP's like a YouTube series. It's Every Frame a Pause, where they get around the copyright laws by playing a show, but they just pause it every like 7 seconds and talk about it, which keeps it all copacetic and legal. I'm literally thinking about doing that with the Bush People show, where I just sit down and react to the episodes. I'll have different Alaskans on from my family, and we will just trash these people endlessly. It's one of my biggest. It's like the crabs. A bunch of media going on about how the crabs are missing in Alaska. They're not missing. The government just wants unfettered access to our waters to pump a bunch of military shit through there. So they told all the fishermen to fuck off by telling them that the crab are missing. And it's like, fuck these people. I mean, they just came in here and stole the entire crabbing industry from the state. And we're just going along with it. And I'm like, fucking torpedoes should be flying. Like, there's no, like, back in the, I can't imagine what would happen in the fucking 30s and 40s and 50s if the federal government had came into the port of Alaska and told them that they couldn't fish. They would have fucking blown their boats up in the fucking harbor. You're talking about full on 1776 shit. Like, we need another Joe Vogler. Pisses me off. Hell yes, do it. That Bush People series, the Browns had me dead. Yeah, I really do think maybe I'll do that. Like, just an EFAP series reviewing horseshit Alaska media, where I just trash Alaska reality shows. I think that would probably get views. I bet that would get views. I might make that a new channel.
I'm interested.
Whole new thing. It's fucking. I gotta come up with a name, and I'm gonna definitely do a play of woods on Alaska Bush People, and we're gonna come up with something funny.
So to me, that's like I'm on the Olympic Peninsula here in Washington, and
cool.
And every time they do like a bullshit show about we're hunting for Bigfoot or something, and it'll be like, we're here in Seattle, and it'll be showing like way out in the woods, and I'll be like, no, that's not Seattle.
I know. Like, so do you know? Have you ever heard of Portlock, Alaska?
No. Like I've heard it, but no.
Okay.
I've got a cousin that lives up there by Anchorage, though.
So there's a bunch of documentaries. So I live in Seward. Seward is named after William H. Seward, the guy who bought Alaska from the Russians and told them to eat a fat dick. The Anchorage is cool. I don't mind Anchorage, but it is the city. And so, if you live in Anchorage, it's like you're living in the city. There's just no way to escape it. There's big buildings and the same shit you get. And, it reminds me a lot of Seattle, which I've spent a lot of time there. Alaskans spend a fuck ton of time in Seattle because it's the closest airport. Like, if you look at who's the most traveled, like the most used airline in the Seattle SeaTac airport is. It's actually Alaska Airlines.
Yeah.
Because they're just constantly going back and forth. It's just like, it's the only state you can fly to from Alaska for like under $200. It's like, they're like, yeah, we'll fly you over there for like, $20 and a handshake, because they're like, we're always going to be going that way. But there's this town called Portlock. It's on a little island off the original Seward Peninsula, I believe. I might be wrong about that, but my geography is shit. So, bunch of miners lived there. Supposedly, the story goes that they slowly started to pour out of the town because something was killing people, and that thing was a Nanatak. And a Nanatak is a native word, basically meaning otter man. Otter man is a thing that eats your soul and kills you. It's a giant yeti. It's a fucking yeti. So, we have all these Bigfoot shows that come over here and cover the story of Portlock, Alaska. You want to know the real story of Portlock, Alaska? I can tell it to you in about 2 minutes. It's all horse shit. Portlock, Alaska was a little cannery town that didn't operate at the operable speed. The neighboring cannery town was better than them. So eventually, everybody from that cannery town went to the other cannery town. At the same time that happened, a couple miners got killed by somebody who murdered them. A human, not a fucking yeti. And a bear mauled a dude. And so the natives, who were worried about people pouring out of that area with monetary value and other people, they've kind of just filtered this story and made it over the years. And then these Yeti people come along and they go, aha! That's a fucking otter man. That's a Yeti. Clearly, we need to go find that otter man. And so they go to this island called Portlock, Alaska, which hasn't had people on it in forever. There's like 2 little structures on it. And every documentary is the same. It's 2 30-year-old retards from SoCal walking around with a camera crew going, any second now, we're going to see him. He's going to be around the corner. Guess what happens? Nothing. They hear a couple rustling bushes from an otter or some bullshit that's on the island that has no people on it, because of course there's going to be animals there because there's no people on it. And then they leave and they make a 45-minute documentary about nothing. And a bunch of Yeti people are like, man, he's out there. It's like, go back to fucking Oklahoma and look. Stay the fuck out of here. Okay, here's the thing. There used to be this thing in Alaska called the short-nosed bear, right? These are really fucked up looking animals. If you've ever looked at what they look like, they have these long-ass legs. They're huge. They've got big, long, protruding snouts. They're mecha Hitler bears. They're huge, right? But the problem with these fucking bears is they went extinct like 125,000 years ago or some horse shit. So I'm willing to see Alaska's a big piece of land, very undiscovered. People don't go there. Maybe it's possible that some of these bears are still out there. Send Forrest Galante out there to get eaten. I don't give a fuck. But stop sending a bunch of 30-year-old millennials to go search for Bigfoot in the woods in Alaska. Because eventually, you're not going to find Bigfoot. You're going to find Big Larry, some dude living in a cabin who's going to put you in his basement and fuck you every night. Like, I don't know what I need to warn people about. This is not the state to go wander around with a video camera and look for Bigfoot. Like, you're not going to find it. Like, it just... fucking it pisses me off. Reality TV in this state, and really every state, I see like Pennsylvania and these random places. The home repair shows make me want to.
The ghost hunters, the fucking they've god,
come to Alaska too. So
yeah,
we have a hotel. We have a hotel here in the town I live in called the Van Gilder, where they're like, this woman got killed back in the day, and so she haunts the hotel. And the person who owns the hotel's written this book about it and everything. And so people show up there. I've been all throughout that hotel. My grandma used to live there. It ain't fucking haunted. I don't even think anybody actually died there. There weren't, like, they have no evidence of it happening. There's no, like, real hardcore, like, this is a thing that happened. There's like, well, we heard this person died in Seward. A lot of people died in Seward. It was a fucking mining town. You know how many people got stabbed here and shot here for money or because they fucked the wrong person? Like, who are we kidding? Like, Then every street corner is haunted by Lucky Larry, the gambler of West Street. Like, it's just stupid.
And my town it's like an old logging town. It's a little town in like back in the 1800s because it was full of loggers. And they would have the tavern and brothel street with also the church on it. And they would just like the sheriff or whatever would just put a car or like, put their carriage at each end of the street. And then Sunday they'd go in and pick up all the bodies. And it's like, yeah, but that's just like people killing people. That's not like, it's not anything spooky. It's like, those reality TV shows.
You ever been to any like amusement parks?
The one up by Seattle.
There's this place, this wonderful slice of heaven called Knott's Berry Farm. And lots of people do not go to Knott's Berry Farm in California because they hear of Disneyland and they hear of Universal. And so everybody goes to those things. Knott's Berry Farm is the best amusement park in California. It was started by this old dude. He moved a bunch of Old West churches. He basically built an Old West town in California out of real Old West towns and then just preserved them there and used them as the attractions for this amusement park. And they got rides and all the same shit as all the other amusement parks. But that little town strip of all the little towns, he built this story around it where they like rob a train and then the guy has to run and he gets killed and hung and that's the whole thing, right? Or he escapes on the train or something. It was a long time since I've been there. I can't remember, but that isn't the Old West. Like, that isn't what it looked like. That isn't the reality. There were no draws at noon. There was no duels at mid. Like, that wasn't a thing. Like, people just didn't do that. Like, this whole, like, kind of thing that's built up around it where people, like, take 8 steps back and, draw and, reach for their gun and shit. That almost never happened. Like, it just wasn't. What did happen is guys walking up to guys in bars and blowing their head off.
That's what the mirror's for.
Right, exactly.
That's what the mirror in the bar is for. When you're sitting at the bar and there's a mirror, it's because you'd be like, oh, this fucker doesn't like me. Time to fucking either do something or get out of here.
Right. It would happen when you were, I don't know, like riding into the town or before you got there. Like, people did die all the fucking time, constantly. But it wasn't in this, like, grandiose way. That entire existence of the Old West exists because of media, television, and music. They just created it out of thin air.
It's like, hey, this is...
And that's exactly what these reality shows are doing in all of these areas. They're just like, eventually, if we say Bigfoot exists, he'll just exist. Because enough people will believe it that it'll just be true. And then they can really make money because then they can market it and get even more, toys and, it's all this shit. Eventually, these people... Bigfoot hunters and ghost hunters are already making movies. Like Paranormal Activity only would have existed and made money if it weren't for those ghost hunter night vision camera shows that became popular on like History Channel and Discovery. By the way, History Channel plays a bunch of those shows. Like Discovery. Like the two channels that were like, we're going to Discovery, the same people who tried to convince you that mermaids were fucking real.
Yeah, Discovery and do you know what they have? Discovery. I remember that when I was a kid, it used to be like, hey, here's this area of the world and here are these animals. And now it's like, yeah, we're racing our cars in the street and we get into arguments in our shop because he wanted to put this engine in. I said, no, we're not putting that engine in there. And
have you seen the drag racing one?
Yeah, the Street Outlaws.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
They just argue. Like 90% of the show is them just arguing and pretending to be mad. And I'm like, that's not how men work.
Okay,
if that guy said that to that guy, he'd kick his ass.
In Alaska, one of those storage auction shows came here. Storage Wars and like the auction some other one with the two guys that were big. One of them's on A&E, one of them's on True TV, I think. Both of them came here. The guy, Ron Oliva, who I've talked about on my show before, he was the dude who ran the auction company. My dad and him were kind of buddy-buddy because my dad used to go to the auctions all the time back in the day. Well, Ron would just fuck people if he didn't know you. Like, because he owned the auction company and he was the auctioneer. So you can't do anything about it. Like, he could just tell you, no, you didn't bid. What are you talking about? Like, it didn't happen. Fuck you. Like, and you're like, I'm going to talk to manager. Oh, nice to meet you. Like, it's like, you can't really do anything. So when those fucking people went up here to film, man, and he just endlessly fucked with them. Like, and when the show came out and we're watching this thing, like, I had to wonder how much this is real. Well, it's not real at all. Like,
No.
the entire thing is they buy one of these storage lockers or one of the cars. And if it's a car, they have a guy go in beforehand, fix everything that's wrong with it and make sure that it runs perfect. And then they come in and do the look through of the car, right? And then they go, oh, look at this. We have to fix this little tiny thing or whatever. They fix it and then they make a profit. And the profit part is real. Like, they're selling the car and making the money, but they're not doing any of the work or marketing that goes into it. That's all handled by a team. Same thing with those auction shows. Like, they just buy a shitty unit. It doesn't matter what the unit is. It just matters what it looks like. And then before they go through it and open it, somebody goes in and plants things. And then they contact experts in that field, which, by the way, doesn't happen. The internet exists. You don't need an expert in the field.
Yeah.
I don't need to go call somebody and pay them $900 to confirm that a signature is real, when I can literally send something to a company online for $50 and find out if a signature is real.
Like, straight up Pawn Stars. How many how many people?
I gotta call
I
an
got a guy.
expert.
He'll be here in 5 minutes. He just happens to be expert on 1895 like military weapons from that specific area. Like,
oh, you have a gold crusted dildo that belonged to Marilyn Monroe? I'm gonna have to call my expert on that. Give me 1 moment. He'll be here in 2 minutes. It's like, wait, like, I don't get this. Like, I am no, those kind of shows, man. Reality TV is just it's the opposite of reality. They are attempting to get you involved in a thing that doesn't actually exist.
and we're circling back to religion, right? That's why that's why.
So, yeah, I guess, there's one thing that has to do with that. Like, the amount of like hold up with religious items. That's an interesting rabbit hole.
The relics?
Like relics, yeah.
Like the stuff that the monks bring back to the church, and you shoot them with your arrows first, and they drop it, but you gotta get a monk to pick it up and bring it back to your monastery.
Like
that's Age of Empires 2, actually. That's not real life.
Just like what's it? The fucking knuckles and shit like that, and random bones and body parts and fucking vials of blood. And a lot of it comes from the Catholic side. It's some weird shit, man.
Yeah. They've got a bunch of stuff like that's stolen from all over the world too, don't they? Don't they have just like a shitload of things that they're like, oh yeah, we stole this from these people back in this year, but they're all dead now. So
my favorite is it's comparable to like the Louvre, and then there's another giant museum. I can't remember what it is. It's in England, I think. National History Museum? No, not National History Museum. Antiquities or something like that. But there's 2 giant museums, right? And those 2 giant museums just fight to steal other countries' stuff. Like, that's the entire thing that those 2 museums exist to do. It's just like, oh, you have a painting that we like. We're going to pay this guy to steal it and bring it to us.
It belongs in our museum.
I know. And it's like, okay, you know what? At some point, I'd rather the things get destroyed than some monolithic shithead just running around different countries stealing shit and going, nah, it's ours now. Finders keepers. It's like, you didn't find it. You stole it. Like, England does that shit all the time. It's like Africa and Egypt and all these areas. They're just like, nah, this is ours now. All kinds of stolen things from around the world, including children. Yeah, no shit. Oh, God. Well, I normally keep the shows around an hour, so we can close out if you want. And I'm going to go live tomorrow again, I'm going to do another show here with whoever wants to join me. If you're around, you're more than welcome. Probably around the normal time tomorrow. I'm going to go 30 minutes earlier than this. I was on my way home, so it was a mess. I got to edit some stuff tonight.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on. We got to some of the stuff, and then we had a nice, healthy trailing off into the real important things like Bigfoot, ghost hunters, fishing,
TV, and
garbage
crabs.
TV, auction bullshit shows, which is what really matters in life.
Absolutely. All right, we will catch you guys tomorrow for episode 43. Have a nice night, everybody. Take it easy. Go follow Samuel on Twitter at Samuel Tweed, and me on Twitter at Liberty Layton. And I'll catch you guys later. Peace.